In this video, let's cover 7 tips for better mixes. We'll look at these tips in no particular order, but first we have a new membership. When you sign up, you get 10 free masters, 2 additional masters per month, and access to our in-depth educational courses. More on that at the end of the video. So first up, we have mix all tracks at the same time. Now, one mistake I see engineers make, and admittedly I sometimes make myself, is mixing with an instrument or a group soloed. A mix is more about interaction than it is about individual elements. You could make the drums sound great on their own, but when combining them with the rest of the mix, these interactions will absolutely, without a doubt, change how they sound. So if you want a great mix, you always need to mix an instrument, vocal, or instrument group within the context of everything else. Now, if you're trying to hear something very specific, maybe there's some unwanted resonance somewhere, then by all means solo instruments until you find it. But again, if you have multiple parts that you have to have work together, then they need to be mixed together, not individually. Let's take a listen to a mix that already has some processing, and notice that when I solo the drum bus, it sounds a good deal different than when I play everything together.
I'm heading downtown, running from the hill. I ended face down, looks like I had my fill.
Next up, we have Don't Be Afraid to Skip Around. So as engineers, it's easy to get caught up in strict, super logical thinking. And this makes sense because we're dealing with multiple variables, all coming together simultaneously. So thinking about things logically is definitely helpful. But flexibility is just as, if not more important. For example, say I started one of the track chains with EQ. By the end of the chain, I'm hearing a frequency that just isn't working, or it's too prominent. Now, the worst thing I can do in this situation is be stubborn and think, no, the EQ has already been set and established. Let me add another processor or try to make it work by changing the latest insert, etc. Now, there's nothing wrong with going back to the first insert and changing it as needed. The same thing could be said about jumping between instruments. You don't need to finish an instrument group before working on another. Any processing that you add to one instrument will interact with the processing on another. As the relationship between these instruments change, you'll need to be flexible enough to adjust previous forms of processing and levels to accommodate that change. To illustrate this idea, let's take a listen to an example in which I've purposely made my first insert cause a problem. Then I'll fix the issue by making the needed changes instead of trying to avoid them or introduce more processing.
I'm heading downtown, running from the hills. I ended face down, looks like I had my fill.
Next, let's cover the best way to avoid overprocessing. So overprocessing is definitely different than using a lot of processing. I used to think, well, if I want to avoid overprocessing, I need to use less processing. But this just causes the mix to not sound finished. Instead, the best way to avoid an overprocessed sound is to ensure that processors are not conflicting with one another. Let me give you an obvious example just to show you what I'm talking about. So, say I want to boost 2 kHz on the vocal by 3 dB. The right way to do this would be to insert the EQ and boost the range. A not so great way to do this would be to insert an EQ and boost 2 kHz by 8 dB, and then insert another EQ and attenuate the range by 5 dB. The first way accomplishes the job with one processor, then the second method needs 2 processors and redundant processing to accomplish the same task. Although this example is really straightforward, many processors and processing types interact with one another in unexpected ways. So let's take a look at a more complex example. Say I excited the vocal to get a bright sound. Now the sibilance is too harsh, so I need to de-ess heavily. Now I can't get the de-esser to balance the sound without it becoming too noticeable, so I have to add a resonance reducer. I didn't set the resonance reduction thoughtfully, so now my vocal doesn't sound as full, so I'll add a saturator. The saturator adds harmonics to the highs, and now the sibilance sounds harsh again. Now you get where I'm going with this. It's easy to get caught in this kind of vicious cycle of I want this, but now this is wrong, I fixed this, but now this is off, etc. All I had to do in this example was insert the de-esser before the exciter. The sibilance is now controlled, and then the vocal is brightened. That's a lot easier, less CPU intensive, and sounds a lot less processed than using a bunch of processors in a roundabout way. So use as many processors as needed to achieve the sound that you want, but ensure how your processing is optimized. Let's take a listen to an example of a vocal that's overprocessed due to improper routing and conflicting processing. Then we'll take a listen to the vocal with processing that's introduced thoughtfully.
I'm heading downtown, running from the hills. I ended face down, looks like I had my fill.
Next, let's talk about why exciters are your friend. So exciters don't get the love they deserve, at least in my opinion. We often associate exciters with an artificially bright sound, but when they came out in the 70s, an era of production known for a natural and smooth sound, exciters were used on almost everything. They work by first splitting the signal between the original and a parallel channel. The parallel channel introduces a high-pass filter, after which harmonic distortion takes place. Then the affected signal and the original signal are combined. This design causes the saturation element to read the fundamental as a higher frequency. Subsequently, harmonics form from this fundamental, causing high-frequency harmonics. These harmonics are really helpful for a few reasons. First, harmonics create a psychoacoustic effect that makes lower frequencies easier to hear. So, say the kick's higher register is being excited. This means that when someone listens to it on a speaker that doesn't support the kick's fundamental, they'll still perceive the kick as being there. Next, they add signal to an often sparse frequency range, making the highs complex and full, as well as act as an EQ shelf for high frequencies. Now, since the harmonics are amplifying specific ranges, we can think of this as frequencies being amplified, similar to how an EQ amplifies. Lastly, by generating high-frequency harmonics, we're improving the signal-to-noise ratio by masking the noise. Noise and hiss usually reside in the high frequencies and are always a huge pain to try to get rid of, but by generating harmonics that include no noise, they shift the relationship between noise and musical signal in the favor of musical signal. So let's take a listen to the mix with exciters disabled and then enabled, and notice how we increase the clarity, the mix's presence, and just have an overall more balanced sound.
I'm heading downtown, running from the hills. I ended face down, looks like I had my fill.
Next, it's important to know what should stay mono. So mono compatibility is important, but it shouldn't be the primary focus of a mix. In short, there are elements that should stay primarily mono or in the mid-image. However, don't be afraid to move elements around, either through hard panning, psychoacoustic delay effects, or binaural processing. So to keep things simple, 3 elements of a mix should almost always stay mono or centered. These are the kick, the bass, and the lead vocal. Everything else can be moved around the stereo image as needed. For example, guitars could be panned left and right, BGVs could be delayed to move into the 180-degree stereo field, and a supporting synth could be panned with binaural panning to make it sound like it's behind the listener. Now, all of these things will make these instruments less mono-compatible. But if the mix is being listened to on stereo speakers, headphones, earbuds, car speakers, and even through most TV speakers, it's going to sound fine. And since music playback is shifting to earbuds more often than not, I think more creative stereo imaging could be introduced. So just be sure that the super important instruments like the lead vocal, the kick, and the bass stay in the center. Aside from making the track more mono-compatible, having these elements centered is going to keep the mix driving. So let's take a listen to a mix in which mono-compatibility was unnecessarily prioritized, and then we'll listen to one in which creative panning was used. Notice how the mix is augmented from taking advantage of the full 180-degree stereo field.
I'm heading downtown, running from the hills. I ended face down, looks like I had my fill.
Next up, let's cover avoiding mix bus processing. So I think the biggest mistake someone can make when they're mixing is to mix with processors on the stereo output or the mix bus. I understand the idea. People want to hear how their mix and the effects that they're using will sound when everything is turned up and compressed. But doing so gives you an entirely unrealistic depiction of how the mix actually sounds. Now, some engineers like to mix and master at the same time, and that's totally fine if that's how you work. But if that is how you work, then these processors on the mix bus can stay. If you're sending the track to another engineer, though, they'll need to be taken off first. So I really recommend making a mix sound as good as you can without stereo bus processing. Instrument bus processing is a completely different story. Adding processors here is incredibly helpful, and it's going to give the instrument groups a collective sound. But again, avoid processors on the mix bus. So let's take a listen to a mix that was done with a limiter on the output throughout the entire session. Notice that when the limiter is removed, the mix kind of falls apart.
I'm heading downtown, running from the hills. I ended face down, looks like I had my fill.
Last up, let's consider keeping emulations and processors era specific. So plugin emulations of gear are great. They give us access to processors that would either be difficult to route or too expensive to own outright. But with all of these emulations comes a strange mishmash of eras in production. For example, say I add an 1176 to my kick, but then on the snare I used an intelligent compressor from Ozone or something like that. On paper, this doesn't seem like an issue, and you might disagree with me, and that's totally cool, but I'm convinced that to the listener, something subconsciously doesn't feel right. Now, the vast majority of listeners will not be able to tell you what compressor you're using on a particular instrument. Most won't even be able to tell you if compression is happening, but they'll either enjoy the sound or they won't enjoy the sound. Now, this is why I make an attempt to keep my processing within a particular era of production. There's some flexibility here, but I want to avoid using a classic-sounding processor with a much more modern and digital-sounding one. The same goes for reverb and other temporal effects. I'm not going to use a classic-sounding plate reverb emulation and then digital-sounding algorithmic one on another instrument. Now, the one caveat to this is with a processor that's incredibly transparent. For example, if I was to use a Weiss compressor from the 90s and an 1176 from the 70s, the first will sound naturally dynamically controlled, and the latter will sound distinctly compressed. But in this instance, there isn't much conflict between the two sounds. So let's take a listen to a mix in which processors are kept within a certain time frame, and then we'll listen to one in which an unlikely combination of processors are used. The latter won't sound bad, but let me know if there's something that feels off to you in the comments. As I was saying at the beginning of the video, we have a new membership. When you sign up for the membership, we'll master your first 10 songs for free. Additionally, every month we'll master 2 more songs for free. These 10 free mastered songs and 2 monthly free additional mastered songs will continuously accumulate in your account. Furthermore, you get access to Sage Audio University. Our School of Mastering course is now available in its entirety. It's a 21-video, nearly 4-hour course that teaches mastering in depth from a technical, practical, and creative perspective. Additionally, members can access our SAU community, where you could introduce yourself, ask questions, share insights and experiences, and connect with like-minded and passionate artists and engineers. In the SAU Mix Review community, you can post your mixes and get feedback from us and your fellow producers and engineers. Last up, you get some great perks like 51 mixing and mastering chain templates, 20 unmixed multi-track sessions from various artists spanning multiple genres that you can use for mixing practice, 42 finished mixes for mastering practice, and 58 plugin presets created by our engineers. All of this is available to you for a low monthly cost. And if you sign up for the membership today, you'll receive a custom 70% discount, which brings the total monthly membership cost down to $15. And this discount is locked in, so you'll continue to receive it for as long as you're a member. If you're interested, use the link below to sign up with a 70% discount.